imagine you're writing this highly complex, mathematically perfect economic report, right?
Right.
You're projecting out the next decade of the global economy.
Getting every little detail in place.
Exactly. And then exactly 16 days later, just 16 days, the entire global chessboard is violently flipped upside down.
It's basically a forecaster's worst nightmare.
It really is. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone. That is exactly the wild premise we are unpacking for you today.
It's a completely unprecedented situation.
So for today's deep dive, we have this incredibly timely update from the Global Review.
Right, the March 20th brief.
Yep, published March 20, 2026, written by Fareed Novin. And it carries this rather ominous title. It's called Strategic Disequilibrium.
Ominous is definitely the right word for it.
Our mission today is to really unpack how a sudden, massive geopolitical rupture forced the world's top economists to just, well, completely rewrite their predictions.
Tossing the old ones right in the trash.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking predictions for the U.S. economy, for inflation, and global stability all the way through 2030.
And, to really understand the whiplash of this new update, we have to look at the baseline they abandoned.
The famous March 4th brief.
Right. On March 4th, they gave a 55% probability to a scenario they literally called the new normal.
Which sounds nice and safe.
Very safe. It was this manageable, slow-growth economy. Inflation was finally tamed. Supply chains were healing.
Right.
But this new brief, the one from the 20th, it's an honest, rigorous, and, frankly, painful post-mortem of why those odds just tanked.
It's like the authors built this meticulous house of cards with their March 4th forecast.
Uh-huh.
And 16 days later, someone just opened a wind tunnel right next to it.
That is the perfect analogy. And to understand why that new normal died, we have to look directly at the catalyst.
Day the wind tunnel got turned on.
Exactly. February 28th, Operation Epic Fury.
Right, so we move from the economic setup directly into the military action.
Yeah, the U.S. and Israel initiated a direct conflict with Iran.
And geopolitically, the ramifications of that are obvious. But economically, where does that first domino fall? Because the report instantly zeroes in on one specific location.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
It's pure geography, really. The Strait of Hormuz effectively closes.
And that means
We're talking about the immediate halting of 20 million barrels of oil a day.
Wait, 20 million barrels every single day?
Every single day, which, as the report notes, is roughly a fifth of global consumption.
A fifth of the entire planet's oil just erased from the board.
Gone.
I mean, how does the global market even begin to process a supply shock of that magnitude?
With absolute violent panic. Buyer's panic. We saw Brent crude spike from around $72 to nearly $120 in just 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks.
Yeah, the sheer velocity of it is staggering. And it wasn't just oil. Natural gas markets caught fire, too.
Right, there was the drone attack on March 2nd.
Exactly. Qatar Energy had to suspend its LNG liquefied natural gas production. And Qatar is, 20% of the globe's LNG?
Roughly, yeah. So you have crude oil and natural gas taking massive hits simultaneously.
Okay, but looking at this timeline, I have to ask. I'm looking at the original forecasters.
Sure.
A conflict in the Middle East has been a simmering possibility for, years.
Right, it's not a new concept.
So how did this elite team of economists completely miss it in a forecast made on March 4th?
Well, what's fascinating here is that they didn't actually miss it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they modeled this exact energy shock. They called it Scenario B, and they gave it a 30% probability.
Oh, as a tail risk.
Exactly. The mechanism, the closed strait, the spiking crude, it was all mapped out.
So where did they go wrong?
Their only error was misjudging the timeline. They severely underestimated how quickly and severely the U.S. administration would pull the trigger.
Okay, so the U.S. pulls the trigger, the energy bottleneck happens, and that geopolitical shock instantly translates into a tax on the American consumer.
A massive tax.
Let's dig into this macroeconomic fallout, because this is where it hits home for everyone listening.
Absolutely.
The report points out that gas is hitting a 3.72 national average. But the real alarm bell, the one that stood out to me, is diesel crossing $5.
Yeah, $5 a gallon for diesel is a huge threshold. Diesel is the lifeblood of the physical economy.
Right, because everything runs on it.
Exactly. You could drive an electric sedan to work, but the truck delivering food to your grocery store,
That's diesel.
the tractor harvesting wheat, heavy machinery building houses, all diesel.
So when it crosses $5,
It acts as an immediate inflationary wave across food, manufacturing, construction, everything.
and the report describes the resulting pain as this K-shaped dynamic,
The K-shaped recovery, yeah, or K-shaped dynamic in this case.
meaning this energy shock is highly regressive. It's not hitting everyone equally.
Not at all.
Like, a wealthy household might grumble about filling up their SUV, but they absorb it. Meanwhile, lower-income households are being absolutely crushed.
Because they spend a vastly larger percentage of their budget on basic fuel and groceries. It's the visual of the letter K. One line goes up, the other goes sharply down.
Widening inequality.
Exactly. And this places the Federal Reserve in a terrifying bind.
Right, the stagflation trap.
Because the data shows the labor market is actually weakening. The report highlights negative net employment in February.
Meaning real jobs are disappearing.
Yes. Yet the Fed voted 11-1 to hold rates at 3.50 to 3.75%.
Only Governor Marin dissented.
Right. And core PCE inflation was revised up to 2.7%.
No, wait. If the labor market is contracting, if people are actively losing jobs, why is the Fed holding rates? Aren't they supposed to cut rates to save those jobs?
In a normal demand-driven recession, yes, that is exactly what they do.
Make borrowing cheaper to stimulate spending.
Right. But this is an exogenous supply shock. It's an outside force destroying the supply of energy.
So if they cut rates now...
If they cut rates, they put more cheap money into consumers' hands. Those consumers try to buy goods.
But there are no goods because the energy supply collapsed.
Exactly. You have more money chasing significantly fewer goods. If the Fed cuts rates, that $120 oil inflation becomes permanently entrenched in the economy.
Oh, wow. So they are forced to prioritize inflation credibility over employment.
They have to. It's
Yeah.
the nightmare scenario of stagflationary monetary policy.
Yeah.
Stagnant growth, high inflation.
Okay, so we've seen this real-world economic pain. The government triggered a shock that's hurting consumers and trapping the Fed.
Right.
The obvious question is, why? Why would the U.S. do this?
That's the big question.
And to answer that, the report shifts into this Bayesian game theoretic analysis.
Which sounds incredibly intimidating.
It does.
But it's really just the mathematics of strategy. It's like playing poker. Every time a new card flips...
You recalculate the odds based on the new evidence.
Exactly. That's Bayesian updating.
And the report models two players here. Player one is the U.S., and player two is global markets and adversaries.
Right. And prior to February 28th, Player 2 assumed the U.S. would prioritize domestic economic stability above all else.
But then the U.S. flipped a card.
They revealed their true nature. The report categorizes the U.S. as a primacy-assertive state.
Primacy assertive. Okay, let's unpack this. That means the government is making a calculated choice to absorb massive domestic self-harm for strategic dominance.
That's exactly it. They are willing to take the job losses, the inflation, the K-shaped inequality, all to project hard power abroad.
And just to be totally impartial here, because we are just reporting on what the source material says, the author points directly to the administration's messaging.
Yes, they do.
They quote President Trump characterizing the high oil prices as, quote, a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace.
Right.
And again, we're just citing the report's factual evidence here to illustrate this primacy-assertive posture. It's a public acknowledgement that domestic damage is an acceptable cost for military objectives.
Exactly. It's the defining variable they plug into the game theory model.
So if we take this new primacy-assertive reality and run it through the math, how do the probabilities for our future shift?
The board is totally flipped. Scenario B, that stagflationary stress we talked about, is now the modal outcome.
The most likely path.
Right. It jumps from 30% to 50%. Yeah. A literal coin flip that we're trapped in stagflation.
And the new normal.
Scenario A drops from 55% down to 35%.
Wow.
The cohesion needed for it just doesn't exist anymore.
Which leaves scenario C, the AI-led productivity boom.
Right, and that stays at 15%.
Even though AI is contributing massively to the GDP, right? The report said 30% of growth in the first half of 2025.
The tools work beautifully. The productivity gains are real, but the energy shock suffocates it.
So it's like, tell me if this analogy works. It's like AI is a Ferrari.
Okay.
It's this incredible machine, but this energy shock just put it in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
I love that.
The engine is perfect, but the physical road conditions, the cost of energy to run the data centers and build the chips, you just can't move forward.
The macroeconomic reality is dictating the speed limit.
So the U.S. is stalling its own tech progress and hurting consumers for global dominance. But that brings us to Section 4. Projecting global power is expensive,
Incredibly expensive.
which leads to the government's own fiscal fragility and specifically the OBBBA stress test.
The One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Right. This was supposed to be the cornerstone of U.S. economic strategy.
It was. It relied heavily on using incoming tariffs to offset massive tax cuts.
But then right before the conflict, there was this surprise Supreme Court ruling in February.
Under the IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act,
The court basically struck down the presidential tariff authority.
which was devastating to the federal budget.
Yeah,
Because suddenly, the tariffs were deemed an overreach.
meaning the government has to pay that money back.
Exactly. It triggered up to $175 billion in importer refund claims immediately.
Oh my God.
And it cost the Treasury an estimated $2 to $3 trillion in lost revenue over the decade.
The money they needed to balance the tax cuts just vanished.
Gone.
And the OBBBA was supposed to reshore manufacturing too, right? Bring factories back to the U.S.
Yeah, but you can't reshore manufacturing when diesel is $5 a gallon.
Right. The input costs for concrete, steel, transport, it's impossible.
The entire industrial policy breaks down, and this brings the report to a terrifying metric. The R is greater than G condition.
Okay, wait. R is the interest rate on the debt, and G is economic growth.
Correct. And when R is greater than G, you're entering a debt spiral.
So what does this all mean? Like a literal debt spiral?
Yes. The report projects that by 2031, the interest rate the government pays to service its debt will be higher than the growth rate of the economy itself. Total debt is on track to hit 120% of GDP by 2036.
So the sequence is you lose tariff income, you face an energy recession, and you have to borrow at higher interest rates because the Fed is trapped.
Exactly. Your fiscal space vanishes precisely when you need it most for a war.
Which is incredibly toxic. And when the U.S. fiscal house catches fire, the smoke chokes its allies.
The fracturing of G7 cohesion?
Right. Because the U.S. initiated this unilaterally, but the costs, the inflation, the energy prices are borne by the whole G7.
The WEF called it an economic architecture of contradiction.
That is a very diplomatic way of saying the U.S. is hurting the very allies it needs to maintain its primacy.
Exactly. And we saw this on March 9th. There was an emergency G7 meeting to coordinate releasing strategic oil reserves.
And it failed.
It failed completely. France publicly stated they were, quote, not there yet.
Which makes sense. I mean, can you really force sovereign nations into binding economic agreements when their own citizens are suffering 4% inflation?
Especially when the U.S. failed to replenish its own strategic petroleum reserve before starting the conflict.
Right. They drained their own buffer, started a shock, and then asked allies for a bailout.
If the U.S. wants to preserve global financial stability and dollar primacy, ad hoc Zoom meetings aren't going to cut it. They need a credible plan. The report outlines 3 imperatives: binding energy stabilization, monetary coherence, and a fiscal credibility dialogue.
It's just a massive tectonic shift, going from managed tension to acute disequilibrium, as the author puts it.
It's the invisible hand moving all the pieces right now.
Yeah. And for you listening, whether you're looking at prices at the pump, trying to forecast loan rates for your business, or wondering why the AI boom feels stalled, this geopolitical rupture is what's driving it all.
It's the defining variable for the rest of the decade.
But before we wrap up, there was one passing note in the report that I want to bring up. It mentioned that renewable energy has become significantly more cost competitive since the conflict started.
Well, yeah, because traditional fossil fuels just became painfully expensive overnight.
Right. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. Could this massive geopolitical conflict, driven by a desire for global dominance, resulting in historic oil shocks, paradoxically become the chaotic catalyst that forces the U.S. into a green energy transition?
Wow.
Like faster than any peacetime climate policy ever could.
It would be a fascinating, completely unintended consequence.
It really would. It just goes to show no matter how perfectly you build your scale model of the future, someone can always turn on the wind tunnel.
It really can.
Thank you so much for exploring this deep dive with us. We will catch you next time.